did you find?
Yeah, if I end after each iClickers, but I'm finding it's not happening every time. Last several times it seems to be working. So anyway, on we go. So mapping is where you want to find out everything in the application. You're trying to find the attack surface, and this is a lot harder than you might imagine because web pages are built with a lot of strange technologies in a sort of contradictory way. And so anyway, you may have a really hard time finding every page in a website. You may never really know. So to enumerate the content, one thing people do is run an automatic spider. Now this is a very simple program. All a spider does is you load a page and it clicks on every link on the page. If it's in the target domain, of course. If you don't restrict it to the target domain, it ends up on an infinite search through the whole internet. And the only person that wants to do that is somebody like Google or Yahoo that really wants to index the whole internet. But most of the rest of us only want to know what's in one site. So you have a domain.com that you're researching, and you click every link as long as it goes into domain.com. And then you load those pages and click every link you can find and click every link you can find, and on you go. And this gets some of the content, and it misses an enormous amount of the content. And this is why people talk about the dark web, or the hidden web is like 95% of the web. Because the stuff you can just reach by clicking on links is just the surface. Almost everything else requires some kind of special property like a password to get to. And that's most of the data in the world. And that's the deep web. And there are various people that claim to search the deep web and such. Anyway, so this is one way to do it. Now, if you have a form where you have to fill out stuff, this is a problem for the automated spider because they usually are not actually powered by artificial intelligence or anything like that. What they mostly do is they just have some standard text they put in every field on the form. And I remember I noticed this the first time when I was doing Android app security, and the Computer Emergency Response Team built an automated device to test Android apps, but all it did was click any button it could find and then put something in the form and click buttons again, so it missed a whole bunch of things. And I was surprised when I tested apps that had been around since the time they tested. They found all the apps with a certain security problem, and I found a bunch of apps from that time with the same security problem that they didn't find because I was able to fill out the form. And that's the same thing true of the web. A human can get past something like filling out a form or a CAPTCHA, and a bot is too stupid. These are the kind of simple spiders you're using now. Someday spiders might get smarter. So there's a lot of things that can happen here. It'll fill in the forms, it'll try to walk through things, it'll parse JavaScript, at least looking for more URLs to open. And these are tools you might have like ZAttack proxy and WebScarab, which is a less popular, I think now deprecated proxy. Burp and ZAttack proxy are probably two that are good to use. The others are less popular. Another thing you can do is look at the Robots.txt file. This is a highly questionable thing to do, but you can make a Robots.txt file like this is the City College one that lists all this stuff that apparently they don't want search engines to index. Yeah. And this is like polite search engines, like I think Google, might actually not index this stuff, but for everyone else, this is just your target list. Well, anyway, just a highly questionable plan to like say, please don't go in here, thanks a lot. That's going to make everybody go in there, in my experience. Anyway, so that's your automatic spidering. It may not be able to handle any complicated navigation elements like dynamically created menus. It might miss whole areas. And if you have things inside, links inside Flash or Java applets, it's not going to find them either. So a whole bunch of the website might be never picked up. What's even worse, of course, is forms that have validation checks. Like you have to put in a social security number, it has to be the right shape. The crawler tries putting in its standard text and it bounces, and it's too stupid to read the message and know that it bounced. So this, another thing, it can't understand the error message it gets, so it doesn't fix the problem, it just doesn't find any pages there. So when you do a spider, it doesn't find the whole site. It finds some part of the site. You have to be aware that it missed all the hard stuff. What's even nastier is if a spider somehow finds a link that goes back to the same URL, it'll say, well, I've already been here, so I won't load it again, which would make sense, except some forms, like the City College directory, has one URL, and inside there's a whole bunch of stuff that loads in the same page. So loading one copy of that page doesn't really get everything you need. And what's another thing that's nasty, you'll have a parameter that changes the page, but it all from the same URL, so that's a mistake. And then there's the opposite thing. Some applications put things that change in the URL, like a timestamp or a date stamp or a section token. So in fact, the same page has a different URL over and over and over. So Spider will load many, many, many copies of that page thinking they're all different. Sort of like an endless loop. So, that's the problem. If the web had like clear rules and all the pages had certain formats, like where you put the parameter, where you put the section token, it was always the same, this would all be a whole lot nicer, but it's just a gigantic sprawling mass of multiple conflicting technologies and traditions all over the place, and there's nothing to stop your developer from just inventing some idiosyncratic new way of putting stuff in the URL and parameters and just using it. So there's a big issue of whether your spider logs in or not. If you don't give your spider a valid name and password, it won't be able to log in, and it'll really only see the surface. It'll only see the unauthenticated content. If you give it a valid name and password or a valid session token, then it can be in, but the problem is it's probably too stupid not to click on the logout button, so it'll log itself out. And Burp makes an attempt not to click something that just says log out or sign out, but if they have something else that says, another thing that's really good fun is you might log in and hit the management interface. And the management interface might have fun things like delete the whole website, restart the server, and the spider's going to hit those. So, you have to be careful before you send some automated process scanning and clicking all over the website. You might be sorry about the result. So that's the claim. Lots of bad things might happen here. This is one reason I've got a slideshow I'm planning to show you maybe next time about how to burp, which is good. A guy that uses burp a lot. He says one reason to pay for burp is to get the logging function, because you really want to have a log of everything it did, so that if you get a phone call from the client saying, did you or did you not click the destroy everything button, you'll know if that's true, and you can have an intelligent answer of whether you did or did not click that button. There was a guy, I don't know if Joel mentioned in this class, there was a pen tester that came here and gave a talk, and he talked about he was a pen tester at BART, our railroad station. And he hired him to scan BART for vulnerabilities, so they put him inside the network, gave him an IP address, he started scanning, found email server, domain controller, he's doing this stuff, then he found this IP address where you connect, and it just says 1. Type in a 1, it says 1, type in a 0, it says 0, nothing, no prompt, no password, no nothing. He said, well, I don't know what that was, and he goes on. Then half an hour later, he's knock on the door, bang, bang, bang. Have you been to that IP address? He said, yeah, but there was nothing there, so I went on other things. Well, that's all right then. Turned out this was the master control switch for BART. 0 means the trains stop, 1 means the trains go. And there was no password, no banner, no nothing. So the next day, the headline, BART out for 3 hours due to computer glitch. And he's like, that was me, that was me. Someday, as a pen tester, you cause an earth-wide disaster. It hits the front page and yeah. Anyway, so that was the result of his pen test. Dude, there ought to be like a password on that and maybe a banner. There's my improvement of your security. Anyway,
They changed it.
That's a good question. I don't know. That's a very wise question, because this guy actually quit pen testing because he said he got so fed up because every year they'd hire him to do another pen test, and every year he'd find they hadn't fixed anything last year. So he put it in the report again. And he said, after a while, I felt like I'm really not appreciating my job much here. I don't feel like I'm safe. You haven't formed a startup to help people hold on patches or something. He said, this pen testing thing is not really fixing security somehow. Anyway, so here's Hackathon. If you're not logged in, then you only see this stuff. It has a sign-in button. If you do log in, then you get other things, like you can now have a cart and put things in your cart. You can go to user. This has login, password, and register. Right now, because I'm not logged in. But if I do log in, then the login event goes here with username and password in Burp. And after that, I'm going to see more things up there. So anyway, so what is better, and something you must do in addition to automatic spidering, is user-directed spidering, where you just turn on Burp and you just click around the thing. Go places, log in, fill out the forms. And it's recording everything, so you can analyze it later. But that way, you have an intelligent human in the loop. And you're always going to have to do this because you have the judgment that the spider doesn't. For example, you know what might be the most interesting to look at, among other things. And the most interesting stuff is stuff that appears to be patched on. Usually there is something that isn't used very much that nobody takes a look at, like the password reset feature or the hunt for other users feature. I just got an email from someone at the University of Georgia, I think. No, Virginia. University of Virginia. They're using my webpage and wanted to know how to get a Windows 2008 machine or something. And then I wondered who, if it was a professor or student. I went to their website, and every student's home address and phone number and cell phone number is just available to the whole world on the website. And I happen to know that violates federal law. And I thought of telling him, and I said, well, I think I'm not in the mood. I'm less anxious to tell colleges what's going on after University of Louisiana made a federal case out of it. So anyway, I wonder. That could be a CFAA violation, because I'm not authorized to know her cell phone number, and I found it by going to their website. That violates the CFAA. I've sent a signal to a server, and I've received information I'm not supposed to have. Yes. So I'm going to have to delete the video now. I confess to a crime. Anyway, so off we go. So Chrome Developer Tools will do a similar thing to Burp. It will not actually intercept the packets in the middle, but it will record everything, and it's often quite useful. It shows you the time it takes to load things, so you can open the developer tool and it'll show you here's how many milliseconds it took to load each bit, which is usually very important. And then you can figure out what part of your website is taking too long and go fix that. But it also stores every request and every response, and you can view them here. It's just not quite as handy as Burp, and you can't modify anything, but still, it's not a bad thing. One thing that's nice about it is it works even if you're using HTTPS without you having to have a fake certificate. It records it in the browser, so it's a useful tool. Yeah, and there's another timeline showing a graph of how long it took to do various things. All right, so to find your hidden content, automated testing is good, manual testing and luck is good. The things that are probably going to be important are debugging features left over, early versions of things left over, backup copies of live files that might be not executable. Because if you have a file like a Perl script on the server and it's executable and you go to the URL, it runs. But if it's not executable, it just shows you all the source code. And an enormous number of people put secrets in the source code, trusting that the source code won't be visible, which is a really bad practice because there are many problems that cause source code to be visible. And that's one of them. So if you can find any backups, those are awesome. They might have a snapshot of the entire app. You might find new functionality in the testing site. Some websites have another version of the site at port 8080 or 8888, which is the beta testing site, and you might find goodies in there. If they have, you might find off-the-shelf application functionality that hasn't really been removed. Like people put in whole libraries from some third party, they're not using it all, and they do an imperfect job of turning off the features they're not using. And of course, if they're using old versions of anything, that's a wide open door because there's an endless chain of vulnerability reports. And almost, especially since websites are so messy, you use many, many different technologies, it's very hard to update and very hard to audit all the updates. And so typically people leave things years out of date because you have 5 or 6 different technologies on your server, and each time you update one of them, you might break something. So it'd really be a big chore to update them all. You might find include files and config files, source files from which things were compiled. Comments in source code may include clues. This was true of an Android app I was testing. I saw suspicious patterns in the way it was transmitting the username and password, and when I looked at, I decompiled it and forgot the source code from the virtual machine source code, Smalley, and in Smalley it had a test user account and username and password to use, which worked. Pretty interesting. Anyway, so and of course log files are pretty cool. This is one related to that question on the quiz. There's a popular log file device called Elma, which is a server you put on Microsoft-oriented databases, and people often connect it right to the web so you can see the error log everywhere. And then if you send someone a malformed URL, like a URL with an apostrophe at the end, and they click on it, the entire request will cause an error and appear in the log along with their cookie and their token and everything. So it's really a handy session stealing tool. And the same thing is true of any log file manager that puts it up there, and that's why it's good to use methods that won't appear in the logs. Won't put secrets in the logs. So I got a few iClicker questions. Come grab one if you need one. There's the software. That's right. All right. Make this look big. Yeah. Okay. So, which one will cause an automated spider to fetch the same page over and over? The people that made XML we're going to fix all this nonsense by having everything rigid and specified, but it never caught on anyway. All right, and so that is, hey, I said stop. I thought I said stop. What is going on here? I have to wait, okay. All right, now somewhere back here is the actual answers. There we go. Yeah, URLs with volatile data is the right answer. Okay, good. And there. All right, which one will be fetched only once, even though it should be fetched many times? This is the fundamental problem with the web, is that it's a mess, instead of being all neat and organized. Anyway, I'll quit at 30. All right, there we go. And that is context-dependent pages, where the same URL shows different data depending on something else that's not in the URL. All right, so I can go a little further here, and we'll take a break. All right, so brute forcing, which technically should be called a dictionary attack, but I know what he means. This is a common way to find everything on a page, and I'm pretty sure this is what the Google bot does, because it's a well-known thing. I've had it happen to me. Everybody's had it happen to them at colleges. You put some page on a server, and you don't think anyone's going to find it, and in a couple of days, it's on Google, even though you didn't put a link to it anywhere. Because Google is very good at finding everything, and I think what they do is they just have a list of like the most common 10,000 names for everything, and they try them all. That's what you do. So you could have every possible combination of characters, but I don't think anybody does that. They just use a long list of common words, common file names, and try to find them, and that's one way to do it. And Burp has a feature like that, but it is deliberately crippled in the free version to do like one query a second or something, which is ridiculous. So if you actually want to find it, you can either pay $300 for the pro version of Burp, or you can learn how to write Python, and that's the Python script. It's all you have to do. It really isn't much. You just open a socket, you open a file called word list, and then you just put the word in here. Head, host, yeah, A is there, A sub K is the word. And this will just try all the words, and I found that I could try an awful lot of words really fast with just a simple Python brute forcer. There they are. And I tried all 1,800 words in 50 seconds. So it's not that hard. And we're doing this constantly for the CTFs. There's always a bunch of challenges that require you to write little Python scripts to talk to the server. And it's a good thing to learn how to do. You don't need to have a tool to a brute force attack. It's not hard to write your own. And of course, there are other tools you can use like Hydra and stuff, which will let you feed in word lists if you like using tools. But once you learn how to write a little program, tools become less attractive. Yeah?
Where do you get the word list from?
This was just a common, well-known word list I found on the web. The same one I think that they use in Burp.
There is a GitHub account where they have like all possible passwords linked from like whatever leaks.
Yeah, there's a bunch of leaked password lists, but there's also word lists specifically designed for URLs, words that are chosen to be common names of directories or folders on servers. And I don't know how high quality they are, but people offer them. And, all right. The other thing you can do is you can try to find patterns in the terms they use. This has worked for me very well. I remember somebody asked me to like find security problems on their website, and I went to them, and the main login page said login 2. And all you had to do was go to login 1, and you found this old version of an insecure login and get right into everything. It's often that simple, so look for patterns. If you find something called forgot password, then try get password, reset password, retrieve password. You know, people have some kind of naming system. If you name things chaotically, you always forget them. So after a while, you learn some system, some way to abbreviate things, and that makes it pretty easy to guess things to try. Names might use things you can read, like numbers or dates. This is a very common one at colleges, and this is how we did it. There are people that just use like ID equals 1, so that means just 2, 3, 4, 5. If the ID really, if you want to be careful, you probably should have every ID be like a 20-digit random number, so you can't predict it, but most people have some part that just counts up through the numbers, and you can just log in with an account and then try subtracting 1 from your number or add 1 to your number. You might be in somebody else's account. And that's the game. In your include files, you can often load them separately, and you might find clues in there, and the comments might have it. And your Java applets and ActiveX controls may contain data. If you read through them, there's just clues all over the place. Tools and file editors may leave temporary files around. Anything that's passed through a Mac inherits a DS store file that lists all the contents. You'll see it on zip archives and USB drives that have been copied to a Mac. When PHP is edited, it makes a copy called PHP-1 Microsoft Office, when you edit a file, it makes a temporary copy of the file, which is normally deleted in both cases, but if it crashes, then it leaves that behind. So you often find temporary files, and they often contain things like unencrypted versions of files that would be encrypted. That happens to Microsoft Office, does that a lot. If you encrypt your entire profile folder and work on a file, there's an unencrypted temporary copy that can end up other places like in the page file. That's why Microsoft had to switch to BitLocker whole drive encryption, because encrypting any folder or any group of folders is not good enough. When someone steals your laptop, you can't go to court and say, we encrypted it so no one got the database. They say, well, that's not really true. Unless you encrypted the whole drive, you aren't really sure that you got every bit of that database. So BERT can brute force using common lists, like I say, if you get the pay version. It can do dynamic generation of word lists, where it takes the words that exist and tries modifying them. And it can extrapolate things with numbers and dates, try all their file extensions, all the usual things you might want to do. And then try to do automated fingerprinting to try to detect invalid responses and try to guess what's valid, although none of them seem to be too good at doing that. And Google has a thing called Skipfish, which I think is not under development anymore, but I used it for a while. It was a free vulnerability scanner that ran pretty well, and I'm not sure how good it was at finding vulnerabilities, although it did find some obvious SQL injections, but the thing it was really good at was spidering, man, which is obviously what Google's primary interest is. And this thing is a command line tool that really does hunt through websites and seems to find everything pretty well. So I don't know if it's still used, but it was run for a while. It still runs, the old version, but I don't think it's currently being developed. Another thing people use is Dirbuster, mentioned in your book. But Dirbuster, in my opinion, seems to be abandoned. So Z-Attack Proxy is the modern file. I have a real hard time finding anywhere part of the screen I'm not using. Anyway, so Dirbuster's over. And then public information, Google will find a ton of things. There's a Wayback Machine. Often the developers are on places like Stack Exchange getting posts. As just came out today, Hillary's email administrator was on Reddit asking how to hide her address in the archives of emails. And now it has come out. And this is another thing, when you think you've anonymized something, like he said, it was a VIP, a real VIP, do you think, people gossip a lot, they think nobody will figure out who you're talking about, and that's not really so true, Which is kind of interesting, because doctors and lawyers and computer security people all sign non-disclosure agreements, and they all give talks at conventions where they have anonymized the stuff. And it's pretty paper thin, really. Like, I'm reading a Mondiant book in incident response, and the first case history sure sounds like Target to me. And but I don't technically know it's Target, so I guess Target can't sue them. But this is, people dance around something like, people with security clearances will talk about, I know about that, but I can't tell you. But I can hold up this finger when you guess it, or no. So they got these tricks, always have some secret information in the know. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff out there. So then you can, Google has an advanced search that will let you search for everything on the site, links to the site, things related to the site, and so on. There's a lot of tricks to look for pages that link to this page and pages that are related to this page. And this is one thing Shodan will do, and IP search engines will do. Often people run many sites from the same IP address because they're really owned by the same company. So there's a lot of ways to find related things. So some web servers will let you see directory contents. That's a fairly common misconfiguration, where you just put in the directory name with no file and you see a list of it all, like an FTP site. And sample and diagnostic scripts that are put up when people install technology often have vulnerabilities that let you list directories and see pages. Nikto and Wikto are related products that scan servers. It just scans for known vulnerable include files. The one good thing about it is it's a very fast scan that doesn't have a lot of bandwidth. It doesn't usually find a lot, and it has about 8 common false positives that you just learn to get used to. It'll tell you these things that are not true. I thought it was funny, I was in the DoD pen testing. They had bug bounty, and I ran Nikto on the DoD site, and it found like 300 red letter flaws, and I said, yeah, I don't believe that. It was misunderstanding something and claiming there were like 300 direct object access vulnerabilities or something. Anyway, yeah?
If a site says that you're not allowed to crawl it or specify some files or folders in the Robots.txt file, then are you under any legal risk if you crawl the site? Whether you
if you,
thing or just whatever
you're violating the law if you do any analysis of anybody's phones without permission. So if I just if I look and find a vuln on somebody's site, like I'm saying, without permission, I've already broken the law.
Sure, but
And so if you have an agreement with them, then it'll depend on your agreement. But so doing anything beyond their perceived terms of service is a crime. This is the way computer crime laws are written. The lawmakers cannot understand what the crimes are, so they say if you do anything unauthorized, that's a crime, and it's up to the company to define what's authorized. So the companies write the laws. So if they decide that they don't like what you did, it's a crime. That's how it works. If you go to their website and they say, I don't like Facebook, you're using a fake name, they can kick you off. They haven't tried prosecuting anybody for that, but it does violate their policy, and they could argue that it's a crime. Apple's tried this. Apple's tried to prosecute people for violating their terms of service. And there has been an argument that you shouldn't let them write the law, but on the other hand, the way the law is written, it does kind of mean they get to write the law. They get to specify what you're allowed to do, and any deviation from that is a crime. But a lot of this won't hold up in court. If you're not crazy and you get a lawyer and you'll cooperate with your lawyer, then of course not all of it is actionable, but technically it's all illegal. And so here, then it would be if you had an agreement with them, they would specify, hopefully, in the agreement whether they want you to go into the Robots.txt file or not. But that's the game.
Say that you're not doing secure research, you just like Wikipedia, you want to be able to use it without internet access. You crawl the entire site. Can they sue you? Yeah,
well, even running an automated crawler and downloading all the content, especially, I don't know, that in order to punish you, they would have to claim that you gained something you're not allowed to have, or violated copyright, or that you did more than $5,000 worth of harm. And if you run a crawler and it causes a lot of traffic, and they run around like idiots trying to track it down until they spent $5,000 worth of time, they could claim that you caused them $5,000 worth of damage. It's actually pretty gruesome for researchers. There are no reasonable boundaries you can stay behind and still do anything even slightly interesting. As soon as you're having any fun, you broke the law. So it's tough. And so most people live with this and they accept breaking the law to some extent, and they have lawyers judging how much do I dare to break the law, which is really what lawyers generally tell you. How many laws can I break today? How far can I go? When will I really get hurt? And or you stick to only doing your own company, your own test servers, but if you want to do any research in the world at large, you accept some legal risk. Yeah?
So does the same thing apply, for example, to viewing the source of the web page when I open something?
Yes, yes. I think so. Now, if you went to the Google cache to view that source, then you could technically hide behind the statement that you did not connect to their server, so you didn't commit the crime, it's Google that committed the crime. And in many countries, Google is having tons of trouble. Now, for some reason, the American companies aren't pushing it because I think American companies feel like advertising is good, and Google crawling your site and publishing your content is good, but France in particular, many European countries, the news companies are suing Google saying, we put up a news page, you go to our page, scrape the headline, put it on there, then you get clicks and sell ads. You're stealing money that should be ours. And you need to give us money if you're going to use our headlines and put it in your search engine. And they're marking more and more and more of the French web off limits to Google. Whereas other countries are saying, are you nuts? Google is advertising? Hiding yourself from Google is shooting yourself in the foot. But there's arguments about this, and it's just not clear. I know the Google Street Views, to take pictures of everybody on the street, those things are okay in America. They did that in Japan, and they kicked them out of the country. They said, you got to be kidding. We have a concept of privacy that does not include a picture of some guy walking up to a whorehouse, some guy lighting up a cigarette, people think he's not smoking. Even though they're out in the street, it is not okay to just have random guys taking pictures of you, not in Japan, although it totally is in America. And so, they're tough.
There appears to be a company in Berkeley called some Berkeley Research or something, and I found they actually probing the whole internet around for.
Oh yeah.
So is it illegal?
Yes. Yes, I know Rapid7 does it, and they have they scan the entire internet every day for vulnerabilities. They list the malware, they aggregate it, they work in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security, and yet everything they do is fundamentally illegal, and they know it. They hired a lawyer to write a careful statement saying, we know what we're doing is breaking the law, and we have chosen to take the risk, and in order to lower the risk, we advertise, we greatly promote the benefits of what we're doing and hope that people will see we're good guys and not prosecute us. And that is what the Department of Justice officials at B-Side said. They said, you guys shouldn't be upset because we have prosecutorial discretion. We only prosecute the bad guys. So it's okay, you should not worry about breaking the law because you can trust us not to prosecute you as long as you're a good guy. And we weren't very comfortable with that, but that's where we're at. Yeah.
Rapid7 also gives their data acquired for free. They can charge it, but But what they make money on, that they charge for the algorithms that can process all the data, because it's just enormous data. Like you
Yeah.
can take it, but how you can use it, it's a question.
And who's that?
Rapid 7.
Reddit.
Rapid.
Rapid 7. Oh, yeah, Rapid 7. Yeah, that's right. That's another issue. Who can get that data? That's right. Anyway, so Nikto will detect some kind of vulnerability, simple ones. It just looks for a long list of files it would find on the server. And there's Nikto running on my site. And it found the XSS protection header is always defined. It always says that. No CGI directories found. Server leaks e-tags. It always says that. Apache is outdated. That was the only thing that actually made some sense. Apache is outdated. That's true. That's a reasonable complaint. But sometimes it finds stuff. All right. And let me just see where I am. It's way too far to the next iClickers. I think we'll take a 10-minute break now. And maybe if someone wants to climb up high and close those windows, it might make it more comfortable here. It's starting to actually get cold. Anyway, we'll pick up at 7:10. I'm going to stop the recording. And this is 149S, chapter 4A.